To get started on this exercise, you should have downloaded the Handwriting Reveal folder that has the Splash Photoshop document. Now this Photoshop document is exactly the size that we want to set everything up for our final animation. So we're going to go ahead and jump into Adobe After Effects and create a new project. And from here, let's import, going to File, down to Import, and selecting that animation file. Once you import it, the import kind that we want to import this as is a composition that retains the layer files. We'll say Open, and we also want to enable layer styles once this comes up too. We'll say OK. Now when this brings it in, notice that it always brings it in as a full composition and also as a folder with all the layers. In our case, we want to keep the composition, so double-click on the Splash composition to open up that pre-made composition that already has all of your layers into it. Next, let's set up the frame rate and the appropriate duration for this composition. Go up to Composition, down to the Composition Settings. From here, we're going to set the frame rate to be 24 frames per second, and the duration needs to be exactly 6 seconds. We can keep everything else exactly the same and say OK to this. The last thing we'll do to set up our document is go down to our timeline. We're going to turn off visibility for our paintbrush layer, and we're going to lock down the background layer. And the only thing we're going to work on first is going to be this splash text layer, so selecting it to get started. Now to draw off a path over the letter S, we're going to choose our pen tool at the very top of our panel. If you don't see it, it could be hiding underneath one of these other tools, but the pen tool is the one that we want to use. I'm going to choose my composition panel and hit Command and the plus sign to zoom in, and then scroll over so I can see it a little bit better. Again, with the splash text layer selected, carefully click and drag and create your Bezier line along the inside middle portion of the letter S. Now if it's off by a little bit, that's okay. Later on we're going to go back and we're going to change this up. Once you reach the end of the letter S, you can hold down the Command key and then click away, and this will deselect your composition. If you need to go back and make adjustments, you can also go back up to your selection tools, choose the Convert Vertex tool, you can click on it, and you can then click on any of the Bezier handles and move them around. Or you can use your selection tool and click on any of the points and move those around as well. We want to repeat this process for each of the different letters. Keep in mind, as you draw these, draw them as if you were to write them out. So for instance, for the P, again, I'm going to choose my pen tool. I'll go in, I'm going to start off at the top and click once. Then I'm going to make a line going down the spine of the P. If I was to write this, I would then pick up my pen and draw the little arch at the top. So I'm going to hold Command and I'm going to deselect that line. I'm going to create another line that goes around this one. Then hold Command and deselect that one. Repeating this process for each of the different letters, drawing them out as if you would write them. With this done, I'm going to zoom back out so I can see everything by going down to the bottom and choosing Fit. Finally, with my splash text layer selected, you can press the M key to reveal all of the different masks that we've created for this particular layer. Notice that everything has its own unique color and its own unique mask path. Now let's create a line stroke over each of the different paths. In order to do this, choose your selection tool. Make sure the splash text layer is selected with all the paths selected. Go up to Effect, down to Generate, and at the very bottom, choose Stroke. This will add the stroke effect in the effects panel over on the left-hand side. The first thing we need to do is make sure all masks is turned on, so this will affect all of the masks. You can change the color of it to be something noticeable, so I'm going to make mine a bright red. We want to set the brush size to be large enough to cover the entire area that we're masking off. So change the brush size to be about 35 points. There we go. And finally, we want set the paint style to reveal the original image. So at the very bottom, set it to reveal original image. If you need to, you may need to go back and readjust this later on, but for now we can test with what we've got. Now let's see if we can animate the reveal of those strokes. In your timeline, go to the very bottom of that splash text to locate the effects for that layer, twirl it open, and also twirl open the stroke effect that we have. We want to animate the end point for this. Set your playhead to be at the 2-second mark. Then you can click the end stopwatch to activate a keyframe and set the percentage to be 0%. So at 2 seconds, it's going to start off at 0%. Then we can move our playhead to the 4-second mark. And let's set our end value now to be 100%. This will automatically add a keyframe to it. Now we can back up our playhead and test out our animation to see it reveal. Notice that as it reveals, there may be some areas that you want to go through and clean up. For instance, when it comes down, I notice that this is off by a little bit and I can see some parts of the P. Also, as I play through, you can see it may pick up on other parts of another letter. So for instance, where the S is. So to clean this up, I'm going to use my selection tool to click on parts to move it over until it reveals exactly what I want. So take some time now and test out your animation till you get it looking exactly the way you like it. Again, you may also need to adjust the size of your line to make sure it plays out correctly too. All right, now when I play through, this is looking really good as far as the reveal goes. From here, we can choose our splash layer again and press the U key twice to close everything out. Let's make a duplication of this layer and change its color. To do this, with the layer selected, you can go up to Edit, down to Duplicate. Notice that this will make a second version of your text. We're going to double click on this one or hit the return key and call this colorized text. Notice the colorized text is on top of your splash text. With this layer selected, let's add a color tint to it. Go up to Effects, down to Color Correction, and choose Tint down towards the very bottom. With the tint selected, let's set the white map to be a bright color. In this case, maybe I'll make it a bright blue. We'll say OK. The final thing I need to do is to offset my color timing for this one. So with this color text selected, press the E key so that you can see all of the effects that we've got, and open up the stroke panel so that you can reveal the starting time for this one. Let's move this first keyframe forward just a little bit in time so that it's off by just a bit. Now when it plays, it's going to have the white leading it off with the blue trailing behind just a bit more. Again, let's back out, do Fit, back up our timeline, and test out the effect. So notice you've got a white leading color coloring on top of the blue. With this done, we can press the U key twice to close out everything, and we're done colorizing and animating our text reveal. I'm going to lock down both of these layers. Now let's see if we can animate a little line coming in from the outside of the frame to the top of the S that we have. I'm going to hold down my space bar and move my composition up just a bit so I can see this outer artboard, and I'm going to move my playhead to the 3-second mark. With none of the layers selected, let's choose our pen tool one more time. We're going to set the fill color to be none, so hold the Option or Alt key and cycle through until fill is set to none. Let's set the stroke color to be the same as the color of our text. So I'm going to choose the little eyedropper tool and then click on the text to pick up that exact same color. We'll say OK to it. The size of this can be about 30 pixels. We'll set that to be 0 at the top. Again, with none of the layers selected, I'm going to click down here at the bottom, just underneath the S, and then click and drag to draw a line, to curve it, and then finally click once at the very top to curve it into here. Now if I need to change the curve, this is where I can also hold down the Option key and click on my little starting point, and I can rechange the curve, or I can use my selection tool to click on it and change where it's going to be as well. As long as the curve kind of matches where the S is coming into, that's what I'm looking for. Note that this has given us a new shape layer at the top of our layers panel. I'm going to rename this layer our intro line layer. Now with it selected, I can twirl open the layer options and also twirl open the contents, and we're going to click on the little add button at the very side, and we're going to add a trim path to it. Adding this trim path will allow us to adjust the look and feel of it. I'm going to now move my playhead to the 2-second mark. Let's go to our start value for trim path 1 and click the stopwatch to add a keyframe. Set its value to be 100%. Let's also click the stopwatch for the end value, but we're going to keep that at 100% as well. Notice that this will make your line disappear, so this will be the ending point that we need. Now let's back it up by 1/2 of a second. So go to your playhead and move it to 1 second and 12 frames. Now we need to add our starting position and how it should look as well. Let's set the start value now to be 0%, so all the way down. Then finally, let's see if we can have the end point trail it by just a fraction of a second. So I'm going to set my playhead back just a few frames to 1 second and 5 frames. And then let's set our end value now to be 0%. If we were to play it, this is what it looks like. Notice that it's starting and then catching up to it at the very end. So it starts off long and then tapers in to there. And that's looking really good. Let's apply some easy ease to all of these keyframes. Click and drag over these keyframes, then go up to Animation, down to Keyframe Assistant, and choose Easy Ease. This will convert your keyframes into the little hourglass shape. This will let it start and play in nicely from here. The last thing we want to do is to add some taper to our trim path. We can close out our little trim path options. Then we can open up the Shape 1 option. Then for the Shape 1, we can choose Stroke 1. And under the taper, we'll open that up as well. For the taper, let's set the length of it to be 100%. So the start length to be 100%. Finally, you don't have to click any stopwatches. Notice that it's going to give a little taper for everything that we've got. From here, you can save up your stuff, and we can also press the U key to close out everything for our intro line and test it out. Now, just as we've added a little intro line that connects to the beginning of the word splash, let's add an exit line that connects to the end of the letter H and goes off the frame. To do this, we're not going to rebuild it from scratch. Let's use the existing line that we already have. To do this, choose your intro line layer, go up to Edit, let's duplicate that layer, and let's rename this our exit line. To move it into place, let's place our playhead on the 4-second mark. This is right where the H ends. Then choose your selection tool and carefully click where that line is. Notice that I've got the exit line layer selected. You can then double click on the line and then be able to click once on any of the points. So for instance, I want to move just this bottom ending point. So this is where it starts. I'm going to click and drag and move it up to the starting point for the H. Looks like I've got two of them selected. So very carefully, there we go. Just this one selected. I'm going to put this starting point at the end of the H. Let's do the same for the ending point. Choose the end of the S. We'll move it off key. Then my midpoint, I'm going to move it to circle around this way. If need be, you can click on the little Bezier handles and choose the path to make it seem like it's going to move a little bit more naturally. Maybe I'll put it down right about there. That looks good. So we want it to swoosh all the way down and around and off the edge from the H, backing out to the end of the frame that we have. Now in order to see this effect take place, with the layer selected, press the U key so that you can see all of the animations for the start and end times. And we simply need to drag these keyframe moments to start at the 4-second mark. So I'm going to click and drag and select all of those keyframes and drag it over till it starts right here at frame 4. Finally, when we press the space bar, we can test it to see what it looks like. Let's see the whole animation. So it starts in and then goes out to the end. That's looking really good. Let's press the U key to twirl everything closed. The last thing we want to do is to have our paintbrush follow along the intro and exit paths. If you go down to your timeline, let's turn on visibility again for our paintbrush, and you can see it's its own little icon or artwork on its own layer. To get it to follow an existing path, the first thing we need to do is to copy that path. Let's do it for the intro line first. We've already got a line that we want it to follow. So in the intro line layer, let's twirl open the contents, choose the shape 1 path, and then click open path 1. So here's the path that we want to copy. Select that path and then go up to edit and let's copy it. Now with it selected, you can hit the U key to twirl everything closed. Now let's select the paintbrush and let's move our playhead all the way back to 1 second and 7 frames, right about here. With the paintbrush layer selected, let's press the P key to open the position and select the word position. With the position selected, let's go to edit and paste. Notice now it automatically pasted some keyframes and it added a motion path for it to follow along to. Since we want the timing of this to be exactly the same, make sure that the first keyframe is set to 1 second and 7 frames, and this last keyframe needs to be dragged back all the way to the 2-second frame. So make sure they're both deselected. Let's drag this all the way back to 2 seconds right here. Now when you test it, you can see it'll follow along. If you do test it, you can see it's still off by a bit. That's because we need to add easy ease to both of these keyframes. So with them both selected, go to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, and choose Easy Ease. This will allow it to stay nice and with everything that we have. Now if you need to, you can see how this is getting off by just a little bit on this middle section. So with this, you can select this one and then move it forward or backward to get it to also match up to where your keyframes need to be. Now everything is moving nicely along with its animation. The last thing what we'll do to this is to get the paintbrush to automatically rotate as it moves along this path. And this is called Auto Orient. To do this, with the layer selected, the paintbrush layer, go up to Layer, down to Transform, and then choose Auto Orient. With this one, tell it to orient along the path and say OK. And now notice that it automatically rotates along with it as well. Again, you can go back and test it. The final thing that we need to see is that this paintbrush is on top of everything. So maybe the last thing I'll do is, once we close out everything, is to put it on top of all of the other lines. And last thing I noticed is that we need this to end right at 2 seconds as well. So on our timeline, click at the very edge and drag it down to end or stop right at 2 seconds, right there. Now when it plays through, it'll disappear right at that 2-second mark. The final thing we're going to do is to add a path for the exit line for our paintbrush to follow along with as well. So as we've done before, let's choose our paintbrush layer and let's go up to Edit and let's duplicate that layer. So this paintbrush 2 will be our exit line. Just as we've done with our intro line, let's open up the exit line, the contents of shape 1, and then path 1. Choose the path, then go up to Edit and Copy. So now that that path is copied, we can hit the U key and twirl everything closed. Let's go to our paintbrush 2 layer and let's toggle the starting time for this to be at 4 seconds over here, just so we can see it. So we'll start at 4. Now with the paintbrush layer 2 selected, we can hit open it up, choose the P key to open the position. Let's press the stopwatch to get rid of all of the current keyframes. Make sure your playhead is right at 4 seconds. Then from here, with the position selected, go to Edit and Paste. Notice that this will copy on that keyframes for each one. We can now select that first keyframe. Let's add some easy ease to it by going up to Animation, Keyframe Assistant, and Easy Ease. Let's choose that last keyframe as well. Animation, Keyframe Assistant, Easy Ease that. We want the time of these to match up perfectly as well. So make sure the first keyframe starts at 4 seconds and the last keyframe needs to be at 4 seconds and 17 frames. Let's move it all the way up to here and then move out to this. With this done, the last thing we need to do is that middle keyframe to make sure it sets up and stays with it. You can see it's off by just a little bit. So clicking on this little middle keyframe, I'm going to back it up until it touches that area. So now it fits and works nicely for it. Let's test our animation. Very good. The last thing we need to do is to render our video. Go up to File, down to Export, and let's add it to the render queue. In the render queue, make sure the render settings are set to the best settings. The output mode, you can choose high quality and click on the word high quality. You can set it to be a QuickTime video. We'll say OK to this. And then you can click to choose output mode for the splash movie. And let's save it to our desktop or to your personal folder as splash movie. And we'll click Save. Once you're finished, you can click Render, and this will create your movie file. Make sure to upload both your movie file and your After Effects project to the class page.